heads of state. I don't know whether you know them. His Excellency Jakaya Kikwete, the one who was speaking, former President of Tanzania. His Excellency Desalegn, the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia. His Excellency Koroma, former President of Sierra Leone. His Excellency Mazuki, former President of Tunisia. You know where Tunisia is? Many of you don't even know. It is near Libya. They know Libya more than Tunisia. The Right Honorable Prime Minister, the Right Honorable former Prime Ministers, the former Vice President, Professor Gilbert Bukenya, and all the dignitaries here. The theme is sustainable development in Africa. And we have been engaged with this issue since independence. Our political movement, which started as a student movement, had time to study and sort out our thinking, because thinking is quite confusing. Now, in the last 60 plus years, as a student movement, as a fighting force, liberation movement, and as a political party in government, we have identified what we called strategic bottlenecks that block socio-economic transformation in Africa. At one time, we even had a problem with these terms, sustainable development. Our question was, how can you sustainably remain an infant, remain the same organism? That's why we insisted on introducing in another word, socio-economic transformation. Not only development quantitatively, but qualitative jump. This is what happens in nature. A baby is born, grows quantitatively as a baby, a child, but at some stage, he must undergo transformation. When he or she becomes a teenager, certain changes take place in that person. Goes from childhood to teenage and adulthood. This is what happened in Europe. Europe had to undergo socio-economic metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is a process that is normally in biology among the insects, where the organisms undergo different forms. Take the butterfly. Butterfly starts as an egg, becomes a caterpillar, becomes a pupa, and becomes a mature butterfly. This is what happened in Europe. It's a pity that in the universities, they don't teach the political economy, which we were studying at the University of Dar es Salaam, which helped us so much. The laws that govern the evolution of society. If you look at Europe in 1400, it was a three-class society. You had the feudalists, you had the farmers, the peasants, you had the artisans. By the time of the French Revolution, European society had metamorphosed into a four-class society. That is, the feudalists were still there, but a new class had emerged which never existed in human history. This was the middle class. The people who made a living between the difference between the cost of inputs and the final product. What we call profit. Now this class was called the middle class. We, the more ideological, were calling them the bourgeoisie. This was a new social class. It had never existed in human history. They were making a living on profits, while the landlords were making a living on rent, the feudalists. But the middle class came with another class that never existed much in human history. These were the working class, the proletariat. That's what they were calling them. How were they living? They were living on wages, on salaries. They had nothing else to support them except the sale of their labor. And then the peasants were still there. If you go to Europe now, you will no longer find the feudalists, they are no longer there. You will no longer find the peasants, they are no longer there. You now have the middle class and the skilled working class. So here, when we talk of sustainable development, does it include transformation of the society? If you have a peasant producing another peasant, and you go to the villages, you find 3 generations of peasants, grandfather, father, grandchild, they are all there. This is very dangerous. So therefore, I would really appeal to the thinkers to also emphasize this issue of qualitative jump of the society. And in order to assist this qualitative jump, we identified a number of bottlenecks that were blocking it. Bottleneck number 1, in the case of Africa, before independence, we had a problem of no freedom, lack of decision to make, of power to make our own decisions. So that would have been bottleneck number 1 before independence. But after independence, in many countries, when you hear this chaos in many parts of Africa, it is on account of a weak state. A state without the pillars to support it. Without an army, without a political structure of organized politics, because you cannot have an army without a historic mission. All armies have a historical mission. The British Army was called the Imperial Army. Their mission was to conquer backward people and exploit them. That's why the head of the British Army was called CGIS, the Chief of the General Imperial Staff, an army of empire to conquer other people. That was their mission. And they were not hiding it. Now, the American army, you remember how it started. The American settlers rebelled against the British king and poured his tea in the ocean, Boston Tea Party. And their slogan was no taxation without representation. In other words, they were making middle-class demands of democracy. So they had a political movement, a movement for democracy, political. But that political movement needed an army to defend it. That's how you get the army of George Washington, the Continental Army. So the army of the Americans is to defend capitalism. The Red Army is an army of peasants and workers to defend the interests of those people. What are the African armies for? This is the problem we had here. We had Idi Amin. Idi Amin, that is a soldier. A soldier of what? What is your mission? I'm just soldier. Soldier. Without mission. This was part of the crisis. So, a weak state, because you don't have a political movement in that country, which now creates for you a capable army and other structures. Mwalimu Nyerere, our elder, had to resolve Mwalimu Nyerere had to resolve the old Tanganyika rifles and create TPDF, Tanzanian People's Defense Forces. That's one of the reasons I'm sure Tanzania has been stable all this time, unlike all of us who had a lot of problems. So strategic problem number two after getting independence has been a weak state. But the weak state is from, you could call it strategic bottleneck number three, wrong politics. Politics without a historical mission. The politics of identity. If you say our politics are politics of tribes, of religion, of gender chauvinism, how would you build a capable state? This is the problem we have in some of the countries. Clan armies, sectarian armies. Countries have broken up because of identity. When I went to Sudan, Khartoum, I asked them, I said, what do you call identity in Arabic? They said, Hawiya. And what do you call interests in Arabic? They said, Maslaha. So I said, what is your politics? Is it Maslaha, interests, or identity? Hawiya. So that would be the third bottleneck, the wrong politics. Weak state, created by bad politics, politics of identity rather than politics of interest. I don't have time to go into all that, but in some of the documents we have elaborated it. The fourth weakness we have, bottleneck we have seen, has been the suppression of the private sector. This was another mistake. It is true that people can work for altruism. So you have got a few people who can work without, not working for selfish interest. But the majority of the people work more for private interest. So the separation of the private sector, like happened here in Uganda, Idi Amin expelling our Indian people, was a big mistake. It set us back so many years. And the Indians were helping us, bringing entrepreneurship. And we brought them back, and we brought other businesses. That's how the economy of Uganda has been able to come up. So that was another bottleneck. The other bottleneck has been the export of raw materials. This one is a big disaster. I was meeting an American delegation just now, and I was telling them that, please, the new government of Mr. Trump, be clear on this point. When you export and process coffee, as we have been doing all this time, you get about $2.5 a kilo. The price is now a bit higher, but normally it was around $2.5 a kilo of very good coffee, what they call screen 18, the one with good seeds. When somebody goes and makes coffee, powdered coffee out of that, he may get as much as $40. Now, according to the present value of business in the world of coffee, the present value is $460 billion, the value of coffee business in the world. How much are the coffee exporting countries getting out of that? Only $25 billion. $460 billion, but all the coffee growing countries of the world, all of them, Brazil, Colombia, Vietnam, Uganda, Africa, you get $25 billion. Our wonderful Africa, out of that, gets $2.5 billion. And 1.6 billion of that is coming to Uganda now. But this is because of the high coffee prices. Normally Uganda gets about 900 million out of the 2.5 billion. So, now, if you take a raw material like cotton, so in other words, in every kilogram of coffee, Africa is donating about more than $20 to the rest of the world, if not more. But also donating jobs. If you take textiles, cotton has got like 6 job levels. You grow the cotton, that's some job. When you harvest the cotton, you gin it, you remove the seeds. That's another level of jobs, the ginneries. Now, much of the African cotton has been ending there. They export what they call lint cotton, cotton without seeds, after removing the seeds. Then somebody else goes and does the spinning. Spinning is another level of jobs. Then the weaving, that's another level of jobs. Then the printing of colors, that's another level of jobs. Then the tailoring now to make garments, that's another level of jobs. Of course, there are other values in cotton which Africans were not bothered with. Gunpowder is from cotton. People don't know that. That's why the Chinese were taking a lot of cotton. Because part of the cotton is what you use to make nitrocellulose, which makes the gunpowder. So that's another bottleneck. They're relying on raw materials, exporting. You are donating money and donating jobs. When you see these children dying in the Mediterranean, going to Europe, this is the problem. They are being killed by these economies of raw materials. So you can go to every raw material, whether it is agro-based or minerals. Some people wanted us to export. We have got very good iron ore here. The best in the world, high grade, 70% pure. It's the best. There's only the one of Peru is near, about 50%, but ours is much higher. So some people wanted us to export iron ore, or butare, we call it in our language, to India. And one of our districts, where some people who are here, whom I see come from, had already made a deal with India that we sell our iron ore to them as iron ore. I said over my dead body, I have banned all the export of unprocessed minerals from here. Let them stay in the ground. When the grandchildren come, they will get them out. So, a ton of iron ore at that time they would give us $47. Then they go, because it is very high quality, a ton of iron ore gives you 700 kilograms of steel, almost 1-to-1. Now, from a ton of steel, that time they were getting $900. So, the sleepy Africans here, the French have a good word, dolmil beaucoup, that we are sleeping too much. The sleepy Africans would get $47. A clever outsider would get $900 from almost the same amount of. Later on, when the price had come down a bit of steel, it was about 600, 700. I don't know where it is now. But it's much more than what we would be getting. So I said, no way. Let the iron ore stay in the ground. Because then you would be losing jobs, losing money. So raw materials are a curse. I don't know what this forum has, what position they have taken on it, but really that is a real curse. Now, sometimes when Africans wake up a bit, they concentrate on import substitution. But that's not good enough, because the internal market is not big enough. we must, yes, do import substitution, but also engage in export promotion, because the export markets are bigger than the internal market. That's also another area to look at. Now, the other bottleneck are the small economies, the balkanization of Africa into these small markets. Because when people really wake up, you will soon find that the internal market is not enough. In Uganda, when these Ugandans got some stability and woke up, in a very short time, they found that everything was in surplus. The internal market was not enough. The milk production, 86 were producing 200 million liters a year. We are now producing 5.3 billion liters of milk a year. But the Ugandans consume only 800 million liters. So more than 4 billion liters of milk is surplus. The internal market is not enough. Maize, cement, steel, all those products, tires and so on, industrial and even agricultural. The internal market is not enough. So that's why the regional market becomes very crucial. I'm very grateful to the East African leaders when they agreed, including people like His Excellency Chikwete, when they agreed that we revive the East African community and expand it. And also all the African leaders, because they have agreed on the CFTA, Continental Free Trade Area of the whole of Africa. It's already signed, but the only problem is implementation. So the forum should look at how we can intensify, because part of the problem of the CFTA is the infrastructure. At one time, we were talking of the railway from Djibouti to Dakar, from Mombasa to Kisangani. But now, I no longer hear about that. So in terms of our sensitization, we should emphasize that the market, the infrastructure to support the market. Then infrastructure. That's another bottleneck. Because we were talking with the World Bank. I went to Nairobi for the World Bank meeting, and I said, you wonderful people, you talk of the private sector-led growth. Yes, but the private sector needs low costs of doing business, which means low cost of electricity, low cost of transport. Labor is low cost, that's no problem in Africa. The labor is not expensive. But you need low cost of money in the bank, and so on, which means infrastructure. So infrastructure must be emphasized, not just, and when the World Bank talk of infrastructure, sometimes they talk only about the roads. The roads are good for cars and passengers, but not good for cargo. For the cargo, we need the railway. The railway and the water transport. They are much cheaper. So that's another bottleneck. Then, of course, education and health, the human resource. The human resource, you cannot have the transformation if your people are not educated, they are not healthy, they are not skilled. Here in Uganda, we have been having another bottleneck. This is the big proportion of the population outside the money economy, only working for the stomach, for eating. Because here in Uganda, you don't have to be very, very brilliant to survive. You can survive even if you are not. You eat mangoes, you go to your relatives, you spend all the time. Your relatives see you coming. Where are you going? I have come to see you. Imagine. I have come to see you. The man is not working, he's not what, but he's eating. So, we checked when we came into government, and we found that by independence, only 4% of the homesteads were in the money economy. The rest, 96%, were outside the money economy, working only for the stomach, for what they call subsistence. That because the land is so rich, you can grow food which you eat, even if it's not very nutritious, but you appear to be alive. But how? Okay, that's eating now. But how about other needs? How about a better house? How would you build a better house? Because you need money to buy cement, to buy this, to buy this. How about transport? A better means of transport. Those are non-food needs. So even if you are growing your own food, you have got these other needs. How would you solve them? That's why, when we checked, we found that only 4% were in the money economy by independence. Then we started talking about it, and when we checked again by the other first census of 91, we found that only 32% of the homesteads were in the money economy. 68% were outside. We started talking and pushing some programs, but by 2013, still only 32% were in the money economy. 68% were outside. Their taboo was money. All families don't have money. Bedira sente. Umuzuro gwabwe sente. Umuzuro is our word for taboo. So if you have got 68% of the homesteads, they don't have money. What are you doing? So that's how I had to persuade these people to say, please, let's involve the army now. We are to bring in the army to take seedlings to people, to beg them, please, get out of poverty. We are begging people. Grow coffee and get out of poverty. Take free seedlings, no buying, no what. Taking it to them. Seedlings, this one what, this one, breeding and planting materials. We are calling this Operation Wealth Creation, using the army. Now when we checked, by 2019, the people in the money economy were now, for the first time, 61%. The ones who are still outside the money economy were 39%. Now the army also had started making their own mistakes, so we decided to change and give the money to the people themselves in the parishes, called parish development model. Each parish to get annually some money, which they put in their circle, in their savings and credit or cooperative, and they joined the money economy by doing this, doing that, doing that. When they checked the other time, they said the figure had now gone to 33%, still outside 67% in the money economy. So these bottlenecks should be clearly identified. And we had identified, I think there were 10 of them, which we put in the NEPAD. I went to Addis Ababa and I presented them. They are not well organized here. But that list which we took to NEPAD in Addis Ababa should be brought and shown to you so that you can see whether it makes sense. So therefore, when we talk of sustainable development, according to our experience, this is what we have seen. And I have been persuading these Ugandans that these economies can jump. I have told them that they must aim at a 500 billion economy in the next few years. For them, they talk over 2040. I said that's too far. Me, I think we can achieve it even faster. An economy the size of 500 billion, Ugandan economy, just by adding value to even the raw materials we have, we are already producing now. And also, building a new economy of, because the economy of Uganda has gone through 5 phases now since we got involved in the government. Number 1, minimum recovery. Number 2, expanding the old colonial economy. Number 3, diversifying. Number 4, value addition. But also, number 5, the knowledge economy. The economy of automobiles, of vaccines, of science, not just simple adding value to the raw materials. So with these few words, I welcome you to Uganda, and I wish you good luck. Thank you very much.